Now we have a great local, another Austin-based startup, in addition to Hypergiant, and it's Firefly. And Eric Salwan is Firefly's Director of Commercial Development. Based in Cedar Park, Firefly Aerospace is developing launch vehicles and spaceships. It also landed a contract with NASA in November of 2018 to provide lunar payload services. Firefly is committed to providing economical and convenient access to space for small payloads through the design, manufacture, and operation of reliable launch vehicles. So welcome, Eric.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Eric Salwan. I'm glad to be here today. I work for Firefly, and I am in charge of selling rockets to people. So in that job, I get a chance to talk to a lot of interesting people, and what we're going to do today is tell you a little bit about Firefly, tell you a little bit about new space and what we are trying to do at Firefly, and then take some questions. How many of you guys watched that launch of the Falcon Heavy, but to me that was one of the most spectacular things that I had ever seen. So that is a $150 million launch vehicle, and Elon put his Tesla and a guy in a spacesuit in there and launched it into space, and now it's like shooting around Mars someplace. So he managed to take what would have been essentially a test launch and create one of the greatest, I think, marketing media spectacles that's ever been done in the world, right? And that's because of the way that he thinks, and that's the way that a lot of people in new space have to think. Really what we're trying to do in new space is we're trying to have a private commercial approach to increasing access and utilization of space and dramatically lowering the cost. And we're out there trying to do it. So if you see the quote by Henry Ford, you can't build a reputation on what you're going to do, it is a tremendous amount of hard work, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. And there are pioneers out there that are really driving it forward and risking a lot to make it happen. So if we start with the technology of new space, and especially what we're doing at Firefly, which is building launch vehicles, we're taking technology that's been developed over the last 50 years, rocket engines. People have gotten pretty good at building these things, but now what we're doing is we're bringing in new technologies, new materials. So if you look at composite materials, now when they're building planes, they're building these giant wingspans out of composite materials because they have a 30% greater strength to weight ratio than metallics. So we're using that in rockets. And the other thing that we're doing is we're enabling mass production of launch vehicles. And it's, before you get into it, like I came into this, I was one of the initial investors in Firefly, and now I'm out there pitching the vehicles to people. But when you come into it and you start looking at the manufacturing process, you realize that those rockets that you're seeing sitting on the launch pad are hand-built by people. There's like a bunch of people that are looking at every component of the rocket, individually designing it so that it's the lightest weight possible, machining it or building it or 3D printing it, and then manually putting it together, because there is not mass production of these vehicles because we've never had the need to fly so many of them as we do now with the change in new space. So what do you do in new space? You have to design fast, build fast, and you test and break fast. And hopefully you get about 90% right the first time. And it's very important to go fast because we are a commercial company. So we have to go out there and we have to raise a tremendous amount of money to do this, and it takes a really long time. And if you waste a lot of time not actually doing things, you never get to the finish line. That doesn't mean that you just go, okay, I'm gonna try this, and then you build it and you break it, because that's very expensive too. So we work with, for instance, University of Texas, and we use their Stampede supercomputer, and we do a tremendous amount of modeling that allows us, before we actually build something, to understand whether it's gonna work or not. But then you just go out there and you build it and you test it. And most of the time the tests go pretty well, sometimes they don't go so well, and you know, that sort of happens in rocketry. You know, nature is always looking for a degree of freedom, and that degree of freedom usually means that something explodes instead of combusts correctly. So you need very creative people to do this, and we do. We have about 250 people working at Firefly in the US. We started, and we'll see this a little bit later, there are some perils, but we started about 2 years ago when we restarted Firefly with about 20 people, and now we're over 250. So we've grown very fast, we've covered a lot of ground. The first vehicle that we're trying to do is Firefly Alpha. So this will put about 1,000 kilograms into low Earth orbit. And if you think about it, a little 3U satellite, which are the smallest satellites that people usually put up there, weigh about 5 kilograms. And a small communications or telecom satellite weighs about 100 or 150 kilograms. So with this rocket, to certain orbits, we can put up 3 or 4 decent-sized satellites that can actually do something and help people make money, because a lot of what we're doing in new space is giving entrepreneurs the ability to go out there and actually create a space-based business, which is pretty cool. I mean, you know, people say get into real estate because they're not making more. Well, if you get into space, there's always more space. So it's a pretty good place to go out there and start trying to create a business. Later on down the road, we're going to create a larger vehicle, and that's our beta, and that'll be about 6,000 to 8,000 kilograms to orbit. We still haven't figured that out yet. We're going to use a lot of the technology that we're designing for our Alpha to create that, and then what we really want to do is create Gamma, which is an autonomous horizontal takeoff and landing space plane. So this is where it gets really cool. Now you have this reusable space plane that takes off autonomously from a horizontal landing strip, flies up, drops off the cargo, and then flies back down again. You reload it with your next cargo and you take it back up again. So that's further down the line, and with anything, we have to prove we can get to space first. We have to prove out our technology, and then we have the ability to do some of these other projects that are going to be really cool. So how did we get here? There are some guys that took giant risks to get us to where we are now, which is this new space revolution. Elon, you know, he made a lot of money, sold out like $300 million worth of, you know, exits. He could have just gone and bought his island and hung out, but he took that money and he created SpaceX and he created Tesla and basically came to the very edge of losing both of those companies, which are now worth, SpaceX is worth about 33 billion, Tesla is worth 50-some billion dollars. So that was one guy that bet his entire fortune and drove very hard to try to get to the end. If you look at Jeff Bezos, he was, since he was a little kid, has dreamed of space. And he went out and he built Amazon, which is one of the most valuable companies in the world. And now he's taking about $1 billion a year and investing it in Blue Origin, which is his space company, to try and push things further. And he's doing a great job. And if you look at Paul Allen, if you guys are familiar with Virgin Galactic, they're doing the tourist space plane. He funded the original design of that, and he's funded a lot of other space platforms, including Stratolaunch. So these are guys that were very, very successful, and they took that success and they've enabled this new space revolution. These are the pioneers that have brought us very far along where we are right now. So what are we looking to do? We're looking to expand human access to space, lunar and interplanetary exploration, lowering launch costs, and having reusable launch vehicles. Initially at Firefly, we're doing an expendable launch vehicle because we need to develop a small satellite launch vehicle to enable some of these businesses. And then as we get experience, we do a reusable launch vehicle, and that is sort of the holy grail. How do you lower cost? It's through reusability. Blue Origin's New Shepard, if you guys have been keeping track of this, they have been very successful, and pretty soon they're going to be able to start doing tourist hops to space. And so for whatever they're going to charge, $200,000 or $250,000, you're actually going to be able to jump into a rocket and go to space. Now, are most people going to be able to do that? No, but it's the first step towards what will hopefully be in the future space habitats and being able to take a vacation in low Earth orbit. So that's pretty cool. And SpaceX is pretty close to actually being able to launch astronauts to the space station. So that's very exciting. The US, since the space shuttle was retired, has not had our own capability to launch astronauts. And so with SpaceX and with Boeing, we're hopefully going to get that pretty soon. Lunar and interplanetary exploration, there's a big push right now to try and get to the moon as soon as we can, and then to try and have habitats on the moon. So that is very cool, and that's happening. And Blue Origin is working on it, Lockheed is working on it. There are a lot of big players that are working on that manned habitation of the moon. And Firefly was selected by NASA as one of the 9 awardees of the CLIPS program, and we're actually working on building a lunar lander, which is pretty cool. We're working with IAI to commercialize their Beresheet lander. If you guys saw earlier this year, they had tried to land on the moon, came very close, and we're taking that and we're actually going to make a commercial version of that. And the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to help lower satellite launch costs. So if you have a new space business and your business depends on putting satellites into orbit, in the past it was very expensive to do that, and you had to wait years to get that satellite on orbit. So you can imagine you build a satellite, it's ready to go, and now you have to spend 2 years waiting for it to get to space. There's not a lot of business, before you can start generating revenue, there's not a lot of businesses that can survive that 2 years while they're waiting to generate revenue. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it more affordable to get to space, and we're also going to make space access more predictable by launching on a regular basis. So now all of these entrepreneurs that have ideas of how they can commercialize space, once they develop the hardware, we're going to make sure that it gets there very quickly. And that's reusable launch vehicle development. So a lot of people are working on this. Paul Allen's company built Stratolaunch, the biggest airplane in the world. That was a $500 million project, and then, unfortunately, he passed away, and the people that were working with him, they couldn't push it forward, so now somebody else bought that Stratolaunch, and it's pretty exciting to try and figure out what they're going to do with it. So what's the economic impact? Where is this going? So there's going to be communication systems, telecom systems, aerospace and defense, internet from the sky that will cover the entire world. Some estimates say that this is going to be a $2.7 trillion economy by 2045. So that's huge. Is that going to happen? We don't know yet, but we know that SpaceX is out there trying to build worldwide internet. OneWeb is trying to do worldwide internet. And what that does is it brings information throughout the entire world. And it really is going to have a significant impact. So the peril of new space. This is, you've heard the expression space is hard. Space is very hard. So at Firefly, what we're trying to do is provide the world's most economic and convenient small satellite launch service. And it's hard to do. We're highly vertically integrated, which means that we build 90+% of the rockets ourselves. And in order to do that, you actually have to build the facilities to build the rocket. So we have probably spent, since we started about 6 years ago, over $130 million. And we now have hundreds of people working for us. And we're finally getting close next year to launching our first rocket and going to space. So this is a very difficult, hard job to do. It takes a long time to get there, and you have to have very dedicated people. And there's a lot of bumps in the road. So we actually are going to show you some of the bumps in the road so you guys have a feeling of what it takes. Thank you.
Challenges of its own, but we're also a new space company, which, you know, the technical part's hard, but the financial part has been equally hard. So I'd just like to officially say that we closed our Series A funding round. It's a huge milestone for the company. We're going to space, and I want to Tesla fast or I want to fail fast. I'm not giving up on this, so we're going to try to restructure this and come back. What that looks like is, as I said, we're going to put everyone on a 1 month furlough, but there's no guarantee that we'll get it together in a month. But I'm rambling, I know, but I don't want to say goodbye. Sorry. Welcome back. Thank you for coming back. There's a lot to talk about, but basically, what we're trying to do here is bring the company back. Unfortunately, we're going to have to do the shutdown again. So I think effectively, everyone should consider this the end of the road. And it's been a great road, great journey. For your purposes and for your own well-being, I would assume that it's permanent. Firefly, and I mean, it's pretty miraculous when you think of the many times we stood here and all we've been through and the different environments and situations we've been in. And I think round 2 is an appropriate term because we kind of literally got knocked down to the mat in round 1. Yesterday we had a huge success in the first test of the Reaver engine.
Proud to announce Firefly Aerospace will establish a new launch and manufacturing project right here in Cape Canaveral. The new project will me and my family, we are from Ohio. I grew up as a son of a blue-collar auto worker, and I realized the importance of industry and the American dream and the middle class and working class. I understand from that upbringing that we have a duty, and what we'll do here is to establish 21st century jobs. I'm so excited to be here to bring 21st century jobs and opportunities to families like the opportunities I have in Ohio today. Thank you.
So that, I mean, that process started in 2014, and now in 2020, we're getting ready to go to space. And you saw Tom Markusic, who is the CEO of Firefly, is the primary person that was on that video. And he worked with Elon at SpaceX, he worked with Branson at Virgin Galactic, he worked with Bezos at Blue Origin, he's worked for NASA. And this is his dream, is to open space, to make space for everyone. And you see it, in order to do that, you have to push through a lot of difficulties, and you just have to keep going. And that really, it takes a drive, and it takes a desire, and it takes a team, and you have to inspire the team to get it done. And so we have a tremendous team at Firefly that is working to bring us to space and to open space for everyone. So that's what we're doing, and happy to answer questions for a few minutes.
What's your plan on reusability? Electrons starting to use the parachutes and SpaceX propulsive landing. What's your estimated approach?
Yeah, so for Alpha, where it's going to be a completely expendable vehicle, reuse for small rockets is difficult. You have to put in a lot of additional hardware. If you're going to do propulsive landing, you have to carry additional fuel. So what we want to do is we want to get to space. Our beta rocket potentially is going to have some reuse, but really what we're looking at is that Gamma space plane that we showed you, and that'll be a fully reusable first stage, and we think that is really going to get us there. But like everything else, you have to prove you can do it. And if you try and bite off too much at the beginning, you're not going to get there, because you're going to run out of money and you're going to run out of time. So this is a race. And if you guys watch the Bloomberg series that the last presenters were talking about, the first episode is about launch, and you'll see Firefly in there along with some of the other small launch vehicles. And it really gives you a feeling for what we're trying to do. And you have to get to the finish line, and then you start attacking things like reusability, similar to what Rocket Lab is doing now.
Why is Texas a good state for you guys to be in? Because I know you moved here to set up to operate out of Cedar Park. So why operate in Texas? I know SpaceX and Blue Origin also have facilities here.
Yeah, Texas is super friendly, especially to companies like Firefly. Tom Markusic is the CEO, worked at McGregor at the SpaceX facility. He ran that facility for a long time. So when he started up Firefly, he knew, hey, this is where we want to go. We want to go to Texas. And we have 200 acres of land about an hour north of here, and that's where you saw those engine tests happening. And we built that from the ground up. So we have just an amazing team that can build anything that the engineers think about. They just send it out there and those guys build it. And the county out there has been super friendly. The people get a little upset with us at night if we're testing too late, but in general, we get along. We had a fireworks display for them. We invited them in to watch engine tests. So just a really good environment. And people, Austin specifically inside of Texas, we picked this because we have to bring people from all over the country to work at Firefly. And so when you bring someone, a lot of times you're bringing their significant other, and you gotta sell them on where they're going. And Austin is an easy sell, great social life, great job market. So if somebody comes with a significant other, they can go out and get a job and they can go out and have fun. So we like it.
That's my other question about testing the engines, because NASA has a big facility near Louisiana, or is it in Missouri?
Stennis, yeah.
Stennis, yeah, and there's like nobody around there forever. So how, is it 200 acres enough?
200 acres is, we're actually pretty close to the road. I mean, it's a little, like in certain videos, if you look online, you'll see as we're doing tests, there's like cars driving on 183 across from the test site. So we built a little berm. Our rocket is small enough and our engines are small enough so that we're okay. We're gonna build another, we're gonna buy probably the other 200 acres over the hill to continue expanding, but yeah, we've had good success so far.
Yeah.
At the risk of boring everybody, can you speak a little bit to the financial risk management and mitigation challenges that some of your prospective commercial payload customers might be facing? And have you seen any change or evolution in the insurance market, obstacles that they face?
Yeah, so if you guys have been following some of the accidents that have been happening lately, the satellite insurance market has taken some big hits. And so that is making insurance more expensive. In terms of risk, especially earlier launches, people take substantial risk to fly on new launch vehicles. And some of those people, because we're gonna give them a good deal, don't need to buy insurance, or if they do buy insurance for what we're doing at Firefly, it's a smaller launch vehicle and they're smaller satellites. So if you look at what flies on a Falcon 9, those could be $200 million satellites or $300 million satellites. And when they lose one of those, as you guys saw when that Falcon 9 flew up on the ground, that was Facebook sponsored satellite. I think that was $250 million. That was a total loss. There was recently a satellite that couldn't deploy a solar array, so now it's operating at half power, and that's going to be probably a $100 million loss. So we work closely with the insurance underwriters, and our customers do too. For Firefly level missions, the insurance is relatively reasonable. For the larger missions, they're looking at, it's getting pretty tight to get some insurance on some of those.
Speaking of the commercializing space and like you're talking about, it took like almost 2 years to get satellites up. Are you guys kind of imagining a system that like you would just be able to mass produce these rockets, and that if somebody wanted to, instead of like 2 years, like be like 2 weeks, you just send one out?
Yeah, I don't necessarily know. So 2 weeks would be more like U.S. government might have an option to do something like that, or they might want that capability. Once we are able to mass produce rockets, and hopefully we'll be able to do about 24 a year, we would expect that you can cut down launch to like 6 months or maybe 3 months. But remember, they have to still go out and build those satellites. So at some point in the very near future, launch is not going to be the bottleneck. It'll be the manufacturing of the satellites or the spacecraft that are being launched that will be the long pole in the tent. So what we want to do is we want to eliminate launch as a bottleneck and let people do whatever they want. And they can get us a satellite and they want to launch it that quick, and we can do all of the regulatory stuff, and we have a standby rocket, then yeah, we'll do it.
Way up there, the woman way up at the top, you.
Does Alpha carry secondary payloads, and if so, how much would it cost?
So we do carry secondary payloads, and the average cost per kilogram to 500 kilometers SSO is about $25,000. So it's pretty expensive to put something into space. But what we've done with our first mission is we're doing something called the Dream Payload, and we're going to have an announcement about that pretty soon. And we actually, because it's a high-risk mission, we have some commercial customers, but we also invited educational customers to come in. So we're flying some satellites from UC Poly, we're flying some from Hawaii, we're flying a Marine Corps satellite that they wanted to fly. So we're going to give, at times, people the opportunity to fly with us at a reduced rate, but we will have the options for secondary. And secondaries typically pay a little bit more because there's additional work and structures and stuff that have to be done to accommodate them.
Okay, one more, that's the last one.
In the film, it was mentioned about the A-series fundraising, so I presume that there's facility in there for other than customers or clients to become investors, accredited investors. Is there a prospectus of if this works, there's a profit sharing opportunity, or how is it rolled out?
Yeah, so all the employees at Firefly are owners of the company. Everybody has stock options. It's very, Silicon Valley-like. And then we have a primary investor, which is New Sphere Ventures, and they've put about $100 million into the company since they resurrected it in 2017, which is a big chunk of change. And, there's opportunities, and that's on the finance side for, future fundraising rounds, but it's not really at the consumer level. It's at the, $10 million, $20 million, $30 million level. I mean, these are big checks that people are writing to get involved in something like this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.